Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The following content is provided strictly for educational and entertainment purposes. It does not constitute legal, financial, or psychological professional advice. Divorce laws, tax implications, and custody regulations vary significantly by state and individual circumstances. You should not act or refrain from acting on the basis of any content included in this video without seeking the appropriate legal or professional advice on the particular facts and circumstances at issue from an attorney licensed in your state. The historical trends and case studies discussed here are intended to provide context to a complex sociological issue, and viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence before making any life-altering decisions. The year is 1969. In a quiet wood-paneled office in California, Governor Ronald Reagan picks up a pen and signs the Family Law Act. He doesn't know it yet, but he will later call this the greatest mistake of his political career. With a single signature, the foundational structure of the American household began to shift in a way that had not been seen in 1,000 years of Western civilization. For the first time, a marriage could be ended by one partner without the other having done anything legally wrong. This was the birth of no-fault divorce. Within a decade, divorce rates in the United States would skyrocket by more than double, and the experience of the American man would be fundamentally altered forever. We are currently living in the aftermath of a century-long social experiment that has redefined fatherhood, wealth, and the very concept of masculinity. If you are a man in America today, the statistics suggest that there is nearly a 50% chance you will face the family court system at least once in your life. But what the mainstream media fails to mention is that the why and the how of this process have changed so drastically that the strategies used by your father or grandfather are not only obsolete, they are potentially detrimental to your future. This is not just a video about the end of marriages. It is a masterclass on the evolution of the American male's legal and social standing over the last 100 years. To understand why the modern divorce landscape is so treacherous for men, we have to look back at the fault era that dominated the early 20th century. Between 1900 and 1960, divorce was not a choice. It was a legal battleground where someone had to be the villain. In most states, if you wanted to leave a marriage, you had to prove grounds. This meant presenting evidence of adultery, physical cruelty, or abandonment. If neither party could prove fault, the state simply refused to grant the divorce. This created a bizarre subculture of collusive divorce. In the 1940s and 50s, it was common for couples to hire actors and photographers to stage cheating photos in hotel rooms just so they could present evidence to a judge. Men often took the fault upon themselves to protect the woman's reputation, a move that would be seen as financial suicide in today's legal climate. During this era, the social stigma for a divorced man was immense. He was seen as a failure of the provider archetype, often losing his social standing and his connection to his community. However, because the system was so rigid, the divorce rate remained low, hovering around 1.2 per 1,000 people in 1920. As we moved into the mid-century, the Reno divorce became a cultural phenomenon. Because Nevada had the most lenient laws in the country, men and women would travel to divorce ranches for 6 weeks to establish residency, just to get a legal exit. This was the first sign that the legislative dam was about to break. By the time the 1960s counterculture movement arrived, the pressure to modernize marriage laws became an unstoppable force. The introduction of no-fault divorce in 1970 was framed as a way to reduce the animosity and lying inherent in the fault-based system. The logic was simple. If two people don't want to be together, the state shouldn't force them. But the potential outcomes of this shift were far-reaching. It moved the power dynamic from mutual consent to unilateral exit. In a fault-based system, the innocent party had leverage. In a no-fault system, the person who wants out the most holds all the cards. For men, this shift coincided with a radical change in how the courts viewed fatherhood. For most of the early 20th century, the tender years doctrine prevailed. This was a legal presumption that during a child's tender years, usually under the age of 7, the mother was the natural custodian. While this was historically a shift away from earlier patriarchal laws that gave fathers total control, by the 1970s and 80s, it had solidified into a system where men were effectively relegated to secondary parents or visitors. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and various sociological case studies throughout the 80s and 90s show a distinct trend. As divorce became easier to obtain, the role of the father became increasingly tied to financial obligation rather than physical presence. The deadbeat dad trope emerged in the cultural lexicon, often overshadowing the millions of men who were fighting uphill battles in a court system that still viewed the mother as the primary emotional anchor of the home. The economic impact on men over this century of change cannot be overstated. In the 1950s, a divorced man's primary concern was often the loss of his home base and social respectability. Today, the concerns are deep-seated in the legal-industrial complex. We have seen the rise of permanent alimony in several states, a concept that originated in an era when women did not have access to the workforce, yet persisted long after the gender pay gap began to narrow. Historical trends show that while women often face a higher risk of short-term poverty following a divorce, men frequently face a long-term wealth erosion. This is due to the compounding effect of legal fees, the liquidation of retirement assets, and the divorce penalty and career trajectory. When a man is forced to relocate, pay significant portions of his after-tax income in support, and manage the psychological toll of a high-conflict separation, his productivity and ability to build long-term wealth are statistically compromised. Furthermore, we are now witnessing the rise of the gray divorce. Statistics from the Pew Research Center indicate that while divorce rates for younger generations are actually stabilizing or even dropping, the divorce rate for those over the age of 50 has doubled since the 1990s. For men in this demographic, the stakes are at an all-time high. A man divorcing at 55 has significantly less time to recover his retirement savings than a man divorcing at 25. This historical shift suggests that the golden years of retirement are being replaced with the second hustle, to pay for two separate households on a fixed income. By the end of this deep dive series, you will understand the intricate machinery of the modern American divorce system. We are going to break down the specific tactics used in mediation, the reality of shared parenting laws in 2024, and how to navigate the psychological warfare of a contested separation without losing your identity. This series solves the problem of legal blindness, the dangerous state of entering a system you don't understand, based on outdated cultural myths. We are moving past the he said, she said, and looking at the cold, hard data of how the 1970 revolution created the 2024 reality. We will explore the silver bullet phenomenon in modern litigation, and provide a historical roadmap of how men have successfully transitioned from the provider of the past to the co-parent of the future. The rules of the game have changed every 20 years, and if you are playing by the 2004 rulebook, you are already behind. This is the history of the American man's most difficult transition, and the blueprint for how to emerge from it with your dignity, your finances, and your relationship with your children intact. In the next part, we will look at the specific financial traps of the discovery phase, and how the digitization of our lives has made privacy a relic of the past. The transition from the paper-heavy courtrooms of the 1990s to the algorithmic legal battles of 2026 has been nothing short of a revolution. In the past, the discovery phase of a divorce, the period where both parties must hand over their financial and personal records, meant digging through dusty shoeboxes filled with faded grocery receipts and physical bank ledgers. Today, that process has shifted into the digital ether, and for the modern American man, the discovery phase is no longer just about what you own. It is about every digital footprint you have left behind over the last decade. We are now entering an era where your privacy is not just compromised, it is non-existent. To understand the sheer scale of this, imagine a man named David living in Austin, Texas, in 2026. David is a mid-level executive who has spent the last 15 years building a comfortable life. When he receives notice that his spouse has filed for divorce, he assumes the process will involve a standard split of their 401k, the family home, and their joint savings. But within 3 weeks, David's attorney receives a request for production that is 40 pages long. This document doesn't just ask for bank statements. It demands 10 years of Amazon purchase history, every Venmo transaction since 2019, his Google Maps timeline data, and a full forensic mirror of his cloud storage. This is the reality of the modern discovery trap. In the United States, historical trends show that the discovery phase has become the most expensive and psychologically taxing part of the litigation process. It is designed to find inconsistencies. If David claims his monthly living expenses are $4,000, but his DoorDash and Uber Eats history shows a consistent pattern of spending $600 a week on premium deliveries, the court sees a discrepancy. In the eyes of a forensic accountant, your digital lifestyle is the only truth, and your testimony is merely an interpretation. The first major financial trap in this phase is the lifestyle audit. This is where the opposing counsel uses your digital spending habits to establish a standard of living that may be used to calculate potential outcomes for alimony or child support. Case studies in high-conflict states like New York and California show that men are often caught off guard by the granular level of detail. Imagine if every $5 coffee, every subscription to a streaming service, and every weekend round of golf was tabulated into a spreadsheet and presented to a judge as proof of your disposable income. In 2026, the use of AI-driven software allows legal teams to categorize thousands of transactions in seconds, identifying patterns that a human might miss. They are looking for signs of dissipated assets, money spent on non-marital interests, which can be used to claim that you owe the marital estate a reimbursement. Beyond the finances lies the even more treacherous trap of digital metadata. This is where the democratization of surveillance has changed the game. Consider the case of Michael, a father of 2 in Charlotte, North Carolina. Michael has always been a dedicated father, but during his divorce proceedings, the opposing side subpoenas his fitness tracker data and his smart home logs. Why? Because they want to prove that during his weeks of custody, he was actually out of the house until late in the evening, leaving the children with a sitter. They used the data from his smart thermostat to show when he returned home and the logs from his Ring doorbell to verify who entered the house and at what time. In the past, this kind of surveillance required a private investigator at a massive cost. In 2026, you are carrying the investigator in your pocket and wearing it on your wrist. Step by step, the discovery process now begins with a litigation hold. This is a formal notice that prevents you from deleting social media posts, emails, or even text messages. If you delete a conversation with a friend where you vented about the stress of the situation, and the court finds out, you may face a claim of spoliation of evidence. This can lead to an adverse inference, where the judge assumes the deleted information was damaging to your case. For the American man, this creates a state of digital paralysis. Every text message you have ever sent is now a potential exhibit in a courtroom. We also have to look at the evolution of the deposition. Historically, this was an in-person meeting where you answered questions under oath. In the current year, depositions are often recorded via high-definition video and can be analyzed by facial recognition and sentiment analysis software to detect signs of hesitation or stress. When a lawyer asks you about a specific financial transfer from 2023, they aren't just looking for the answer. They are looking for the discrepancy between your verbal response and the digital trail they already have in their possession. They might ask, "Did you ever use business funds for personal travel?" You might say no, forgetting a single flight you booked for a cousin's wedding 3 years ago. Suddenly, your credibility on every other topic, custody, asset division, or career plans, is put into question. The digitization of our lives has also birthed the cloud trap. Most men do not realize that their smartphones are constantly backing up data to servers they rarely check. Old photos, deleted apps, and even location history from a phone you traded in 2 years ago might still exist in the cloud. Forensic experts now specialize in retrieving this archived data. They can reconstruct a timeline of your life that contradicts the narrative you are presenting in court. If you are claiming that you need to reduce your workload to spend more time with your children, but your LinkedIn activity and metadata from professional documents show you are actually scaling up for a promotion, that data will be used to challenge your financial disclosures. The psychological impact of this level of scrutiny is profound. Historical trends in male mental health during divorce show that the feeling of being constantly watched leads to a high degree of burnout and decision fatigue. Men often feel that the system is designed to catch them in a mistake, rather than to find an equitable solution. This is why the discovery phase is often referred to as the war of attrition. The goal is often to make the process so invasive and so expensive that the man simply gives up and agrees to a settlement that is not in his long-term interest just to regain his privacy. But it isn't just about the data you created. It is also about the data others created about you. Tagged photos on a friend's Instagram from a holiday party, a Venmo note from a buddy that says, "Thanks for the bachelor party contribution," or even a comment on a public forum can all be pulled into the discovery net. In 2026, your social circle is part of your legal liability. Legal teams now use specialized software to crawl the social media accounts of a man's closest associates to find evidence of hidden assets or lifestyle inconsistencies. As we look at this century of change, we see that the definition of a private life has been legally redefined. What used to be considered a private conversation between friends is now discoverable evidence. What used to be a private purchase is now a line item on a lifestyle audit. The modern American man must navigate a landscape where his own technology is being weaponized against his future stability. This is not about paranoia. It is about the documented evolution of U.S. family law in the digital age. Understanding this process is the first step in surviving it. You cannot change the fact that the data exists, but you can understand how it is categorized, how it is interpreted, and how the court views the intersection of your digital life and your legal obligations. The discovery phase is the foundation upon which the rest of your case is built. If the foundation is cracked because of a lack of digital awareness, the entire structure of your future, your custody arrangement, your retirement, and your home can be put at risk. But what happens when the discovery ends and the actual battle for the children begins? We have moved from an era where fathers were nearly invisible to an era where the definition of best interests is being fought over in every state house in the country. In the next part, we will dive into the massive shift in U.S. custody laws, the rise of the 50-50 presumption, and the hidden psychological tactics used to alienate fathers from the very children they are fighting for. The battle for the money is over. Now we enter the battle for the bloodline. The shift from the physical custody battles of the late 20th century to the psychological and legislative warfare of 2026 represents one of the most significant pivots in American family law. For decades, the legal system operated under the shadow of the tender years doctrine, a historical trend that presumed mothers were inherently better suited to care for young children. As we moved into the 2020s, that paradigm began to crumble, replaced by the best interests of the child standard. However, in 2026, we are seeing the rise of a new era, the rebuttable presumption of equal shared parenting. This means that in many U.S. states, the court now starts with the assumption that a 50-50 split of time is the healthiest outcome for the child. While this sounds like a victory for fathers, the path to achieving that equity is riddled with modern traps that can derail a man's case before it even reaches a judge. To visualize the stakes, imagine a father named James in Columbus, Ohio. It is 2026, and James is a software engineer who has always been present for bath time, soccer practice, and school conferences. When his marriage ends, he assumes that because he has been an equal parent, the law will naturally grant him equal time. This is where the status quo trap comes into play. In the early stages of a separation, many men are advised to move out of the family home to de-escalate conflict. James does exactly this, moving into a nearby apartment and seeing his children every other weekend while the legal paperwork is processed. By the time he stands before a magistrate 6 months later, he has unintentionally established a new status quo. The court, which prioritizes stability above almost all else, looks at the last 6 months and sees that the children are doing fine with the mother as the primary custodian. James's attempt to be a gentleman and provide space has now been reframed as a lack of initiative. This is a critical lesson in 2026. The patterns you establish in the first 30 days of a separation often become the permanent legal framework for the next 10 years. The best interests of the child standard is the yardstick by which all custody decisions are measured, but it is notoriously subjective. In a deep dive into U.S. case studies, we see that judges weigh several key factors, including the emotional ties between parent and child, the capacity of the parent to provide food and medical care, and the mental and physical health of all parties involved. However, the factor that has gained the most weight in recent years is the willingness of each parent to foster a close and continuing relationship between the child and the other parent. This is where the concept of the gatekeeper parent becomes a central theme in modern litigation. A facilitative gatekeeper encourages the bond with the other parent, while a restrictive gatekeeper uses the child as a tool for leverage. For men in 2026, proving that you are a facilitative parent while defending against a restrictive one requires a level of emotional intelligence and documentation that was rarely expected of previous generations. This leads us into the darker territory of parental alienation. While the term itself has been a subject of intense debate in psychological circles for 40 years, the behaviors associated with it are documented and pervasive. Imagine if a child suddenly begins using adult language to describe why they do not want to visit their father, citing complex financial grievances or repeating specific disparaging remarks that a 6-year-old could not possibly formulate on their own. This is the programming of a child's mind to reject a parent without justification. Historical trends show that alienation often starts small. A missed phone call here, a forgotten jersey for a ballgame there. But in the digital age of 2026, it has migrated to the screens. We now see cases where a parent uses shared gaming platforms or social media accounts to monitor and manipulate the child's perception of the other parent in real time. If a father is playing an online game with his son, the other parent might send a barrage of messages to the child's device, creating a sense of guilt or anxiety about the interaction. The role of the professional network in these battles cannot be ignored. The guardian ad litem, or GAL, is a court-appointed representative whose sole job is to advocate for the child's best interests. In 2026, a GAL's recommendation can carry more weight than a mountain of personal evidence. For a man, the interview with a GAL is a high-stakes performance. Any sign of anger toward the ex-spouse, regardless of how justified, can be interpreted as a lack of co-parenting capability. Case studies suggest that men who focus strictly on their children's needs, schedules, and emotional development during these interviews fare significantly better than those who use the time to air grievances about the marriage. The system is designed to filter out conflict, and often, the parent who appears the most bland and cooperative is the one the court trusts with more time. Furthermore, we must address the rise of the child custody evaluator. These are often PhD-level psychologists who conduct deep-dive assessments into the family dynamic. They perform psychological testing, observe parent-child interactions, and interview teachers and doctors. In 2026, these evaluations can cost upwards of $20,000 and take months to complete. For the American man, this is a financial and emotional marathon. The evaluator is looking for parenting styles. Are you authoritative, providing both warmth and structure? Or are you permissive, trying to buy the child's affection because you feel guilty about the divorce? Historical data indicates that the court system favors structure. A man who can demonstrate a consistent routine, a designated space for the child in his home, and a thorough understanding of the child's educational and medical requirements is viewed as a high-functioning parent. Step by step, the battle for the bloodline in 2026 involves more than just showing up. It involves the meticulous management of one's digital and physical reputation. It requires an understanding of the 50-50 presumption, and the knowledge that this presumption can be rebutted if one parent is portrayed as a threat to the child's stability. We are seeing an increase in the use of temporary restraining orders as a tactical maneuver to gain an immediate advantage in custody. While these orders are intended to protect victims of genuine domestic violence, in the high-stakes environment of a contested divorce, they are sometimes used to remove a father from the home and establish that devastating status quo we discussed earlier. Navigating this without becoming bitter or reactive is perhaps the greatest challenge a man will face. The psychological toll of being a secondary parent is a silent epidemic in the United States. When a man is relegated to 4 days a month, he often experiences a loss of identity that affects his health, his career, and his future relationships. However, the data from 2026 also shows a counter-trend: the rise of the involved father. More men than ever are fighting for their right to be more than a paycheck. They are learning the legal language, they are engaging in conscious co-parenting, and they are utilizing shared parenting apps to ensure every communication is professional and child-centric. This shift is slowly moving the needle of the American judicial system toward a more equitable future. But even if you win the battle for your children, there is another, more silent predator waiting in the wings of the courtroom. It is a force that doesn't care about your parenting skills or your digital privacy. It only cares about the math. As we move into the next phase of this deep dive, we have to look at the cold, hard reality of child support and alimony in a post-inflation economy. We will explore the algorithms that determine your financial future, the trap of the imputed income, and why the winning parent often finds themselves in a different kind of financial prison. The battle for the bloodline is won, but the cost of the victory is about to be tallied. What happens when your hard-earned career becomes a liability in the eyes of the state? We explore the financial architecture of 2026 next. The financial architecture of a divorce in 2026 is no longer a simple division of assets and a monthly check. It is a complex, algorithmic framework that often turns a man's professional success into his greatest legal liability. To navigate this, we must first dismantle the myth that child support and alimony are calculated by a judge's whim. In the modern U.S. legal system, the process is driven by the income shares model, a mathematical formula used by the majority of states to ensure that children receive the same proportion of parental income they would have received if the parents lived together. However, in an era of high inflation and stagnant real wages, the math of 2026 often creates a financial pincer movement that can leave a high-earning man with less discretionary income than he had as a junior employee a decade ago. Imagine a man named Robert, a senior systems analyst living in Denver, Colorado. It is 2026, and Robert earns $140,000 a year. In an intact household, that income provides a comfortable middle-class life. But once the divorce decree is signed, Robert enters the world of the success tax. Under the income shares model, the court looks at the combined gross income of both parents and assigns a basic support obligation. Because Robert is the higher earner, he bears the lion's share of this obligation. But the basic support is only the beginning. In 2026, the court also factors in add-ons: health insurance premiums that have skyrocketed over the last 5 years, work-related childcare costs, and extraordinary medical expenses. For Robert, these add-ons can consume an additional 15 to 20% of his take-home pay before he even covers his own rent. The most dangerous financial trap for a man like Robert is the concept of imputed income. This is a historical trend that has solidified into a rigid legal doctrine. Imagine if Robert, burnt out from the stress of the divorce and the demands of his high-pressure job, decides to take a lower-paying position that offers more flexibility to spend time with his children. He moves from his $140,000 role to a $90,000 role. In the eyes of the 2026 court, this is often viewed as voluntary underemployment. The court may decide to calculate his support obligations based not on what he is currently earning, but on his earning capacity, the $140,000 he used to make. Robert is now legally required to pay support as if he still had his high-salary job, creating a debt cycle that is nearly impossible to break. Case studies from across the United States show that once income is imputed, it is incredibly difficult to have it lowered, even if the industry the man worked in experiences a significant downturn. Then we must address the evolution of spousal support or alimony. In the mid-20th century, alimony was often permanent, reflecting an era where women were largely excluded from the professional workforce. Today, while many states have moved toward rehabilitative alimony, intended to be temporary while the lower-earning spouse gains the skills to be self-sufficient, the duration and amount are still heavily tied to the length of the marriage and the standard of living established during the union. In 2026, the standard of living is no longer just about the house and the car. It includes the digital lifestyle, the annual vacations, and the private school tuitions. For a man in a long-term marriage of over 15 years, alimony can still be a multi-decade commitment. The hidden predator in this financial architecture is the tax code. Since the implementation of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which remains the standard in 2026, alimony is no longer tax-deductible for the payer, and it is not considered taxable income for the recipient. For the American man, this means he is paying his ex-spouse with after-tax dollars. If Robert pays $30,000 a year in alimony, he must actually earn approximately $45,000 to cover that obligation after the government takes its share. This creates a massive effective loss of wealth that many men do not fully grasp until they see their first post-divorce tax return. Historical trends show that this shift in tax law has effectively increased the financial burden on the payer by nearly 30%, compared to the rules that existed for their fathers. Step by step, the financial erosion continues with the division of retirement assets. In 2026, the Qualified Domestic Relations Order, or QDRO, is the tool used to split 401ks and pensions. Men often view their retirement account as a personal safety net, built through years of overtime and sacrifice. The law, however, views it as a marital asset. When that account is halved, the man loses not just the principal, but the compounding interest of 20 years of growth. A man divorcing at age 45 in 2026 is facing a retirement reality where he has to do 30 years of saving in the remaining 15 years of his career, all while paying out the highest support obligations of his life. We also see the rise of the lifestyle audit as a weapon in the financial battle. In 2026, opposing counsel will use everything from your LinkedIn profile to your credit card reward statements to prove that you have more income than you are disclosing. If you are a man who enjoys a hobby like cycling or photography, the thousands of dollars spent on equipment can be used as evidence that you have a high level of disposable income that should be diverted to support payments. Your success is quite literally used against you. Every promotion you receive and every bonus you earn triggers a potential modification of support. This creates a psychological ceiling where men begin to fear professional growth, because the marginal utility of a raise is swallowed by the increase in obligations. Furthermore, the cost of the legal process itself in 2026 has outpaced general inflation. A contested divorce involving expert witnesses, forensic accountants, and custody evaluators can easily exceed $100,000 in legal fees. For many men, This necessitates taking on high-interest debt or liquidating the very assets they are fighting to keep. The financial architecture of 2026 is designed to be a war of attrition where the person with the most liquidity survives. This brings us to a critical realization for the modern American man. The career you built to provide for your family has become the engine that funds your own financial displacement. You are working for a household you no longer live in, to support a lifestyle you no longer enjoy, under a tax code that penalizes your contributions. The data suggests that men who do not understand this math before entering the courtroom are at a significant disadvantage, often agreeing to settlements that are mathematically unsustainable in the long term. But what is the cost of this financial pressure on the man himself? Beyond the bank accounts and the tax returns lies a deeper, more personal crisis. When a man's identity as a provider is stripped away, and his financial future is tethered to an algorithm he cannot control, the psychological toll begins to manifest in ways that the court system rarely acknowledges. We have looked at the legal traps, the digital surveillance, and the financial architecture. Now we must look at the human cost. In the next part, we will dive into the silent health crisis facing divorced men in the U.S., the physical and mental breakdown that follows the courtroom battle, and the shocking statistics on life expectancy and executive burnout that no one is talking about. The money is gone. Now we look at the man. The physiological price of the modern American divorce is a debt that many men spend the rest of their lives trying to repay. When we talk about a masterclass in change, we cannot ignore the physical vessel that carries the burden of legal and financial warfare. In the scientific community, this is referred to as the allostatic load. The wear and tear on the body which grows as an individual is exposed to repeated or chronic stress. For the man in 2026, the courtroom is not just a place of legal judgment. It is a laboratory where his biological systems are pushed to the point of failure. Historical trends have shown a consistent and alarming correlation between marital dissolution and a decline in male longevity. But in the high-stakes environment of 2026, this has evolved into a full-blown public health crisis. Imagine a man named Mark, a 52-year-old project director in Chicago. Mark is at the peak of his career, managing multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects. He is a high performer, used to high-pressure environments. But when his 20-year marriage begins to unravel, the stress shifts from professional to personal. In 2026, the pace of litigation is faster than ever, and the constant digital connectivity we discussed in the discovery phase means Mark is never away from the conflict. His phone chimes at 11 p.m. with a legal update or a message from his ex-spouse. His body responds with a surge of cortisol and adrenaline, the fight-or-flight response. In a vacuum, this response is life-saving. But when it is triggered 6 times a day for 18 months, it becomes toxic. Case studies in 2026 suggest that men like Mark often experience what clinicians call executive burnout, but it is actually a biological shutdown. The chronic elevation of cortisol leads to a cascade of metabolic issues. Mark begins to notice that despite working out, he is gaining weight around his midsection, visceral fat that is directly linked to stress hormones. His blood pressure, which was always borderline, now requires high-dosage medication. He is experiencing the divorce heart. Historical data from the American Heart Association and various longitudinal studies indicate that divorced men have a significantly higher risk of cardiovascular events compared to their married or even widowed counterparts. For men, the marriage often acts as a primary health regulator. Wives are statistically more likely to encourage medical checkups, monitor diets, and manage social schedules that reduce isolation. When that regulator is removed, the man's health often experiences a rapid, unmonitored decline. Then there is the sleep epidemic. In the current landscape of 2026, the psychological weight of potential outcomes regarding custody and asset division leads to a state of hypervigilance. Mark finds himself staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., mentally rehearsing his testimony or calculating his future alimony payments. This chronic insomnia is not just a nuisance. It is a cognitive hazard. Sleep deprivation impairs the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and complex problem-solving. For an executive like Mark, this means his professional performance begins to slip. He makes errors in his project timelines, he loses his temper in board meetings, and he finds it harder to lead his team. This creates a downward spiral. The divorce damages his health, his declining health damages his career, and his damaged career further complicates the divorce proceedings. We must also address the silent killer of the American man: social isolation. There is a documented friendship gap that widens during a divorce. Historical trends show that women are generally more adept at maintaining social networks and seeking emotional support. Men, conversely, often rely on the marital unit for their entire social life. When the divorce happens, the shared friends often drift toward the wife, or the man withdraws out of shame or exhaustion. By 2026, the digital nature of social interaction has actually made this worse. Mark may have 500 LinkedIn connections, but he has no one to call for a beer on a Tuesday night to talk about the crushing weight of his loneliness. This isolation is not just a mental health issue, it is a physical one. Research has shown that prolonged social isolation can be as damaging to a man's health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It accelerates cognitive decline and weakens the immune system, making the man more susceptible to chronic illnesses. Case studies from 2026 also point to a rise in functional substance use. We are seeing a trend where men in high-pressure roles use alcohol or prescription sedatives not to party, but to level out. Mark starts having 2 stiff drinks every night just to quiet the legal chatter in his head so he can sleep. Then he takes a stimulant in the morning to overcome the brain fog from the lack of quality rest. This chemical seesaw is a recipe for a physical breakdown. In the United States, the mortality rate for divorced men is roughly 250% higher than that of married men. This is a staggering statistic that no one in the courtroom is discussing. The system is designed to divide the house and the bank account, but it has no mechanism to protect the life expectancy of the participants. Furthermore, we are seeing the emergence of the identity crisis health spike. For many men, their identity is inextricably linked to their roles as a husband, a provider, and a father. When a 2026 court decree fundamentally alters or restricts those roles, the man experienced a form of social death. This loss of purpose triggers a deep, existential stress that can manifest as autoimmune disorders or chronic pain. Mark begins to suffer from unexplainable back pain and migraines. He sees specialists, but the root cause is not structural. It is the physiological manifestation of a life that has been stripped of its primary meaning. Step by step, the health of the American man is dismantled during the century of change. It starts with the disruption of the circadian rhythm, moves into metabolic and cardiovascular strain, and ends with the erosion of the social and psychological foundations that sustain life. This is the part of the deep dive that requires the most attention because, unlike a bank account, your health cannot be replenished with a few good years of work. Once the divorce heart takes hold or the metabolic damage is done, the man is playing a defensive game for the rest of his life. In 2026, we are finally seeing the beginning of a health-first movement among divorced men, where they are reclaiming their vitality through specialized clinics and support groups that focus on the allostatic reset. But for many, this realization comes too late. They win the discovery battle and the custody battle, only to find they no longer have the health to enjoy the victory. They have been so focused on the legal war that they forgot they were the primary casualty. But what happens to the man who survives the physical toll? What happens when he steps out of the wreckage of his health and his finances and tries to re-enter a society that has spent 100 years changing the rules of engagement? We have looked at the body and the bank account, but now we must look at the social stigma and the new masculinity. In the next part, we will explore the red pill versus blue pill cultural divide, the rise of men going their own way, and why the modern American dating market in 2026 is a minefield for the second time around man. The courtroom is behind you, but the cultural battlefield is just beginning. What does it mean to be a man in a post-divorce America? We dive into the sociology of the aftermath next. The cultural battlefield of 2026 is a landscape defined by deep polarization and a radical re-evaluation of the American male identity. When a man steps out of the family court system, he does not simply return to the life he had before. He enters a social vacuum where the traditional markers of his value have been stripped away or redefined. For a century, the American man was socialized to believe that his worth was anchored in his role as the head of a household, a title that carried with it a specific set of responsibilities and social protections. In the wake of a century of change, that anchor has been cut loose, leaving millions of men to navigate a sociological phenomenon often referred to as the post-divorce identity crisis. This is not merely a personal feeling of sadness. It is a documented historical trend where the societal script for masculinity has been rewritten without providing a new manual for the men who survived the previous edition. Imagine a man named Brian, living in Phoenix, Arizona, in 2026. Brian is 48 years old and has spent the last 24 months in a high-conflict litigation process. He has lost 50% of his retirement He pays a significant portion of his monthly income in support, and he sees his children on a specific schedule dictated by a court order. When Brian attempts to re-enter the social world, he finds that he is no longer viewed through the lens of his professional achievements or his character. Instead, he is processed through the lens of his marital status. In the social circles he once frequented, he is often met with a subtle but palpable sense of exclusion. Friends who were once shared with his spouse now feel like they must choose sides. And more often than not, historical trends show that the social network gravitates toward the mother, leaving the man in a state of social isolation that can be as physically damaging as the health crises we discussed in the previous part. This isolation has birthed a massive sociological shift: the rise of the digital manosphere and the fragmentation of male philosophy into what are colloquially known as the red pill and blue pill camps. To understand this divide is to understand the core of the 2026 cultural conflict. The blue pill perspective, as viewed by sociologists, represents the traditional, idealistic view of marriage and gender roles. The belief that if a man works hard, provides, and remains faithful, the system will protect him. However, for many men who have experienced the financial and legal traps of the modern system, this perspective feels like a dangerous illusion. This leads them toward the red pill philosophy, a movement that prioritizes a hyper-realistic, often cynical analysis of gender dynamics, family law, and the perceived risks of the marriage contract in the 2020s. Case studies in 2026 show that this isn't just an internet subculture. It is a primary influence on how men are choosing to live their lives post-divorce. We are seeing the growth of the MGTOW movement, or men going their own way. This is a sociological response where men, after witnessing or experiencing the potential outcomes of the legal system, decide to opt out of the traditional marriage and family structure entirely. They focus on their own health, their personal hobbies, and their financial preservation, viewing the modern marriage contract as a liability that far outweighs the social benefits. For a man like Brian, these philosophies offer a sense of community and a way to make sense of his loss, but they also create a deeper rift between him and the mainstream social narrative. The 2026 dating market is perhaps the most visible manifestation of this cultural minefield. For the second time around, the rules of engagement have changed fundamentally. Dating apps in 2026 are no longer just about photos and bios. They have become advanced vetting platforms. Imagine if, before a first date, your prospective partner could run a background check that includes your litigation history, your credit score, and a sentiment analysis of your social media activity. In a world of digital transparency, the second time around man carries his divorce decree like a digital shadow. The divorce penalty in dating is a real phenomenon where men with children and support obligations are often filtered out by algorithms before they even have a chance to say hello. They are viewed as having less disposable income, less time, and more emotional baggage, making them less competitive in a hyper-optimized marketplace. Furthermore, Brian finds that the language of masculinity has shifted. He was raised to be the stoic provider, but the 2026 dating world demands a level of emotional vulnerability and digital fluency that he was never trained for. If he expresses frustration with the family court system, he is labeled as bitter. If he remains stoic, he is labeled as emotionally unavailable. This creates a psychological double bind, where the man feels he cannot win regardless of his approach. Step by step, we see men retreating from these interactions. Data suggests that in 2026, a growing percentage of divorced men are choosing to remain single for longer periods, not because they lack the desire for companionship, but because the cost of entry into the modern dating market feels prohibitively high. But there is another side to this sociological coin: the emergence of the new masculinity. Some men are using the aftermath of their divorce to build a life that is not defined by their relationship to a spouse or a state-enforced role. They are redefining their value through mentorship, through deep friendships with other men, and through a more present, intentional form of fatherhood that defies the visitor status often assigned by the courts. They are learning to navigate the digital world with a level of caution and wisdom that their younger selves lacked. This is the potential outcome of the survival process. A man who is more resilient, more aware of the legal and social machinery surrounding him, and more focused on building a legacy that cannot be liquidated in a courtroom. However, the path to this new identity is fraught with social stigma. In the United States, there remains a lingering cultural suspicion of the divorced man. While a divorced woman is often met with a narrative of empowerment and starting over, a divorced man is often met with the question of what he did wrong. This asymmetry of empathy is a historical trend that continues to shape the male experience in 2026. Brian might go to a parent-teacher conference and feel the eyes of other parents on him, wondering why he only has the kids on weekends. He might go to a professional networking event and feel the need to hide his living situation to maintain an aura of stability and success. The social cost of being a divorced man is a tax that never truly stops being collected. This sociological deep dive shows us that the century of change has not just modified laws. It has modified the very soul of the American man. We are living in a time where the old world has died, but the new world is still struggling to be. Men are caught in the middle, trying to reconcile their biological drive to provide and protect with a system that has largely commodified those traits. As we move forward, the question isn't just how a man survives a divorce, but how he survives the society that follows it. The cultural battlefield is intense, but it is only one layer of the experience. Behind the social stigma and the dating apps lies a much more intimate struggle: the battle for the internal world. What happens to the mind of a man who has been through this meat grinder? How does he rebuild his self-esteem when the two things he was told defined him, his family and his career, have been compromised? In the next part, we will move from the sociology of the crowd to the psychology of the individual. We will explore the hidden epidemic of male depression in the post-divorce landscape, the science of rebuilding a shattered identity, and the specific strategies used by those who don't just survive, but eventually thrive. The world is watching you, but what do you see when you look in the mirror? We go deep into the psychology of the rebuild next. When you look into that mirror in the year 2026, you aren't just seeing a face. You are looking at the wreckage of a narrative that took a century to build and only a few months to dismantle. For most American men, identity is a high-rise construction project. It is built on the pillars of professional titles, the role of a husband, and the physical presence of being a father in a shared home. When a divorce occurs, it is as if the foundation is suddenly pulled from beneath the structure. What follows is not just sadness. It is a profound psychological state known as identity vacuum. In the US today, we are seeing a historical trend where men struggle far longer than women to rebuild this internal architecture because, for generations, we were never taught how to define ourselves outside of our utility to others. Imagine a man named Steve, a lead software architect in Seattle. It is 2026, and Steve has just finished his first 6 months living in a minimalist apartment 3 miles away from the home he used to own. Steve is successful by every external metric. He is healthy, he is high-earning, and he has successfully navigated the discovery phase without financial ruin. Yet, when he sits down at his desk in the evening, he is paralyzed by a sense of purposelessness. In his previous life, every line of code he wrote was a brick in the wall of his family's future. Now that wall belongs to someone else. His work feels like moving numbers around on a screen for no reason other than to fulfill a court-ordered support obligation. Steve is experiencing the most dangerous psychological trap of the post-divorce landscape: the decoupling of effort and meaning. To understand how to move past this, we have to look at the science of cognitive reframing. In 2026, we have moved beyond the simple advice of just getting back out there. Case studies in male psychology suggest that a man's recovery is directly tied to his ability to move from a narrative of loss to a narrative of agency. This starts with the deconstruction of the failure myth. In the United States, divorce is often framed as the death of a dream, but from a psychological perspective, it is more accurately described as the end of a specific contract. Step by step, men like Steve must learn to view the marriage not as a 20-year failure, but as a completed chapter that yielded specific dividends, such as children, professional growth, or personal development. If you view those 20 years as a total loss, your brain stays in a state of chronic stress. If you view them as a completed project, you give yourself the psychological permission to start the next one. This brings us to the silent epidemic of male depression in the 2026 landscape. Historical trends show that men are significantly less likely to seek traditional talk therapy, often viewing it as a passive process that doesn't solve the immediate problems of their lives. Instead, we are seeing a shift toward action-oriented recovery. Imagine if Steve doesn't just go to a therapist to talk about his feelings, but instead joins a high-performance peer group. In 2026, these groups are becoming the new town squares for divorced men. They focus on what psychologists call behavioral activation. This means instead of waiting to feel better to take action, you take action to start feeling better. For Steve, this might look like a rigorous physical training program, a commitment to a new skill that has nothing to do with his career, or a dedicated volunteer role. By creating new domains of competence, Steve begins to fill the identity vacuum with new pillars of self-worth that are independent of his marital status. We also have to address the fatherhood pivot. One of the most psychologically damaging aspects for a man in 2026 is the transition from being a full-time father to a part-time parent. The loss of daily interaction creates a sense of mourning that is often overlooked by the legal system. The strategy for thriving here involves a radical shift in the quality of presence. Case studies of successful post-divorce fathers show that they move away from being the fun weekend dad and toward being the intentional guide. This means creating a home environment for the children that is distinct, stable, and reflective of the father's own values. Steve, for example, stops trying to recreate his old life and instead builds a new culture in his apartment. He involves his children in the cooking, the chores, and the creation of new traditions. This restores his sense of agency as a parent and reinforces the fact that he is not a visitor in his children's lives, but a permanent, if less frequent, fixture. However, the rebuild is often hindered by the stoicism trap. For a century, the American male ideal was the man who could take the hits without flinching. While resilience is a virtue, the 2026 environment is too complex for simple stoicism. Repressing the psychological toll of a high-conflict divorce leads to what clinicians call complex post-traumatic stress. This manifests as a hypervigilance toward new relationships, a cynical view of the future, and a chronic waiting for the other shoe to drop. Thriving requires a man to develop what is known as cognitive flexibility. This is the ability to acknowledge the pain and the injustice of the past without allowing those facts to dictate the potential outcomes of the future. It is the realization that while the system may have been unfair, his internal state is the one thing the court cannot garnish. The role of place in the psychological rebuild is another critical, often ignored factor. When a man is forced to move, he often views his new living space as a temporary holding cell. He doesn't decorate, he doesn't invest in quality furniture, he lives out of boxes. In 2026, we know that our physical environment is an extension of our mental state. A man who refuses to settle into his new space is subconsciously telling himself that his life is on hold. The psychological masterclass here is to treat the new home as a sanctuary of autonomy. It is the first place in years where he has total control over the aesthetic, the routine, and the atmosphere. By intentionally designing his space, Steve is signaling to his brain that the period of survival is over and the period of creation has begun. Furthermore, we must look at the data surrounding purpose-driven recovery. Men who focus on the second mountain, a term popularized to describe the shift from self-oriented success to legacy-oriented contribution, show the highest levels of long-term psychological stability. This might mean mentoring younger men in their industry, investing in community projects, or taking a leadership role in a social cause. When a man moves from asking "why did this happen to me?" to "what can I do with this experience?" he transcends the victim-offender dynamic that the divorce system thrives on. The 2026 landscape offers more tools for this rebuild than any previous era, but it also offers more distractions. The temptation to numb the psychological pain through digital escapism or temporary distractions is at an all-time high. The men who thrive are those who recognize that the psychological rebuild is a disciplined, step-by-step process of reclaiming their narrative. They don't wait for the court to tell them they are free. They grant themselves that freedom by deciding that their value is inherent, not contractual. But even as the mind begins to heal and the identity begins to reform, there is a looming shadow that every man must eventually confront. It is the digital specter that we touched on earlier, but now it has a name and a permanent place in the archives of the state. As you move forward, how do you handle the permanent record of your past? How do you protect your future reputation in a world where your most difficult moments are just a search query away? We have fixed the mirror. Now we have to fix the digital footprint. In the next part, we will explore the permanent record of 2026, how to manage your digital reputation, the reality of right-to-be-forgotten laws in the US, and the strategies for protecting your career from the ghosts of your litigation. Your internal world is ready, but is the internet? We dive into the war for your reputation next. In 2026, the concept of a clean slate has become a historical relic. For the American man, the end of a courtroom battle does not mean the end of the scrutiny. It marks the beginning of a lifelong struggle with a digital panopticon that never forgets and rarely forgives. We have moved into an era where your most vulnerable moments, your most heated arguments recorded in court transcripts, and every allegation made during a high-conflict litigation process are archived, indexed, and made searchable by algorithms that don't understand context. This is the Permanent Record 2.0, a landscape where your reputation is no longer what your neighbors think of you, But what a background check AI decides you are based on a scraped PDF from a county clerk's website. Imagine a man named Christopher, a senior project manager in Philadelphia. It is 2026, and Christopher has finally put his divorce behind him. He has spent 3 years rebuilding his finances and his relationship with his children. He applies for a high-level executive position at a top-tier tech firm. He is the perfect candidate, his interviews are flawless, and his references are glowing. However, 48 hours before the final offer is made, the hiring committee runs an automated deep web scan. The AI crawler doesn't just look for criminal records, it looks for litigation history. It finds a series of motions from his 2023 divorce where, in the heat of a custody battle, his ex-spouse's attorney made aggressive allegations regarding his temperament and financial transparency. Even though those allegations were never proven and the final decree was equitable, the AI flags Christopher as a high-risk candidate due to potential volatility. The offer is quietly withdrawn. Christopher is never told why. This scenario is becoming a standard case study in the U.S. professional world. Historical trends show that as data scraping technology has become more affordable, third-party data brokers have begun specializing in the commodification of family court records. In the past, someone would have to physically go to a courthouse to read your file. Today, bots scrape portals like Pacer and state-level electronic filing systems every hour. They pull names, dates, and keywords, creating a shadow profile of your personal life that exists outside of your control. For the modern man, this means that a single season of domestic crisis can permanently lower his professional ceiling. To navigate this, we have to look at the step-by-step mechanics of digital reputation management in 2026. The first step is the audit of the public record. Most men don't realize how much of their divorce is public until they search for their own name. In many U.S. jurisdictions, unless a file is specifically sealed, a process that is becoming increasingly difficult and expensive, anyone with a credit card and an internet connection can download your entire history. This includes sensitive financial disclosures, medical records mentioned in custody evaluations, and even private communications that were entered into evidence. The historical trend in 2026 is that the court system values transparency over individual privacy, leaving the man to fend for himself in the digital town square. The second step involves the use of SEO, or search engine optimization, as a defensive weapon. Since you often cannot delete the records, you must bury them. This is what reputation specialists call the content displacement strategy. It involves the creation of a massive volume of positive, high-authority digital content that ranks higher than the court records. Christopher, for example, would need to publish white papers, engage in public speaking, and maintain a highly active and professional social media presence that pushes the 2023 litigation links to the second or third page of search results. In 2026, if you don't define yourself online, the data brokers will define you. This creates a new form of the divorce tax, a recurring cost for digital scrubbing and content creation that can run into thousands of dollars a year. We must also address the legislative landscape regarding the right to be forgotten. While Europe has made strides in allowing individuals to request the removal of outdated or irrelevant personal data from search engines, the United States remains a frontier of First Amendment absolutism. Historical trends in U.S. law suggest that court records are considered vital public information. In 2026, there is a growing movement for reputation protection acts at the state level, which would limit the ability of third-party sites to profit from the publication of family law documents. However, until these laws are standardized, the American man is caught in a legal loophole where his private life is public property. Beyond the search results, there is the issue of the morality clause in modern employment contracts. In 2026, many corporate roles include clauses that allow for termination or the withholding of bonuses if an employee is involved in any activity that brings disrepute to the company. While a divorce itself isn't a violation, the public allegations that often accompany them can be used as grounds for dismissal. Case studies show that men in high-visibility roles are particularly vulnerable. They are often forced into expensive, private arbitrations or settlement agreements with high confidentiality payouts just to keep their names out of the public record and protect their careers. This is a strategic shift from the mid-20th century, where a man's private life was generally considered off-limits to his employer. The psychological toll of this digital shadow is a form of perpetual anxiety. Men report feeling that they are never truly finished with their divorce because the internet never stops talking about it. This leads to a phenomenon called digital avoidance, where men withdraw from professional networking or public life to minimize the chances of their past being unearthed. Step by step, this withdrawal shrinks a man's world. He stops applying for promotions, he stops taking risks, and he becomes a ghost in his own industry. But there is a potential outcome that is more proactive. We are seeing the rise of the privacy-first man. This is a man who, having seen the devastation caused by digital transparency, begins to operate with a level of data hygiene that would have seemed paranoid a decade ago. He uses encrypted communication for all personal matters, he opts out of data broker databases preemptively, and he uses legal entities like LLCs to hold his assets and protect his name from appearing on public property records. This is the evolution of the American man into a digital sovereign. Someone who understands that in 2026, privacy is not a right. It is a commodity that must be actively defended. The war for your reputation is not won by a single legal victory. It is a long-term campaign of narrative control. You have to be the primary author of your own story, or the algorithms will write a tragedy for you. This requires a level of digital literacy that wasn't required of previous generations. You aren't just a man anymore. You are a brand, and your brand is currently under a sustained data-driven assault. As we look at the wreckage of the digital battlefield, we realize that the century of change has brought us to a place where a man's past is always present. But what if the greatest challenge isn't what the world thinks of you? What if the real test is what happens when you decide to try again? We have talked about the money, the kids, the health, and the reputation. Now we must face the final frontier. In the next part, we will explore the marriage contract 2.0. In an era where you know all the risks, why would a man ever walk down the aisle again? We will look at the rise of the ironclad prenuptial agreement, the sociology of the new companionship, and why the 2026 version of commitment looks nothing like the one your parents signed. The digital ghosts are quiet for now. It's time to talk about the future of the American Union. The ultimate risk-reward calculation is next. The ultimate risk-reward calculation of the American marriage in 2026 has transformed from a romantic leap of faith into a high-stakes corporate merger. For the man who has already navigated the wreckage of a first divorce, the prospect of re-entering the legal institution of marriage is no longer a question of if he is in love, but a question of whether he can afford the potential outcomes of a second failure. Historical trends show that second and third marriages in the United States have significantly higher dissolution rates than first marriages, often hovering between 60 and 70%. In 2026, the modern man is responding to these statistics not by avoiding commitment, but by radically redefining the architecture of that commitment through what is now being called the marriage contract 2.0. Imagine a man named Jason, a 46-year-old commercial architect in Atlanta, Georgia. It is 2026, and Jason has spent the last 5 years rebuilding his life after a divorce that cost him his primary residence and a substantial portion of his liquid assets. He has met Sarah, a successful professional in her own right, and they are discussing a future together. However, Jason's approach to this new union is fundamentally different from his first. In his 20s, he viewed marriage as a spiritual and social union with no exit strategy. Now, in his late 40s, he views it as a legal partnership that requires a clearly defined operating agreement. Jason represents a growing demographic of American men who are utilizing the ironclad prenuptial agreement not as a sign of distrust, but as a mandatory insurance policy for their financial and emotional survival. To understand why this shift has occurred, we must look at the evolution of the prenuptial agreement over the last century. Historically, prenups were the exclusive domain of the ultra-wealthy, the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. By the early 2000s, they became more common among the upper middle class. But in 2026, the prenup has become a standard requirement for almost any man with assets to protect, regardless of his tax bracket. Case studies in 2026 suggest that the social stigma surrounding these agreements has largely evaporated, replaced by a culture of radical transparency. Jason and Sarah don't just talk about their dreams. They sit down with a mediator and a spreadsheet to perform a full disclosure of assets, debts, and future earning potential. In this new era, the marriage contract 2.0 includes clauses that would have been unimaginable to previous generations. We are seeing the rise of the lifestyle clause. While these were once considered frivolous or unenforceable, historical trends in 2026 show that courts are increasingly willing to consider specific, mutually agreed upon terms regarding behavioral expectations. This might include clauses related to digital conduct, such as the public posting of family photos, or even infidelity clauses that trigger specific financial penalties in the event of a breach of the marriage contract. For a man like Jason, these clauses provide a sense of predictable structure in an inherently unpredictable system. He isn't looking for a way to control his partner. He is looking for a way to define the boundaries of the partnership before the emotional fog of a breakup sets in. Furthermore, we must address the sunset clause, a fascinating development in 2026 family law. This is a provision in a prenuptial agreement that states the contract will expire or be renegotiated after a certain number of years, often 10 or 15. This reflects a more realistic view of the human life cycle. The agreement that makes sense for a couple in their 30s might be completely obsolete by the time they reach their 50s. By building in an expiration date, men are ensuring that their legal protections evolve alongside their changing lives. Beyond the prenup, a significant sociological trend has emerged in the United States: the living apart together, or LAT model. Data from 2026 indicates that nearly 10% of committed couples in the U.S. now choose to maintain separate households while remaining in a long-term, monogamous relationship. For the divorced man, the LAT model offers the ultimate risk mitigation strategy. By maintaining separate residences, Jason avoids the legal commingling of assets that often occurs when a couple moves in together. In many states, the act of cohabitation can trigger legal claims to property or support that are strikingly similar to those in a formal marriage. By staying in his own home, Jason preserves his autonomy, protects his children's inheritance, and ensures that his relationship is based on a daily choice rather than a legal entanglement. Step by step, the 2026 man is also utilizing advanced asset protection trusts to wall off his premarital wealth. This is no longer about hiding money. It is about the legal segregation of assets. Jason places his architectural firm and his remaining retirement accounts into a domestic asset protection trust, DAPT, before he ever says, "I do." In the eyes of the law, these assets are no longer his in a way that can be reached by a family court judge. They belong to the trust. This creates a legal firewall that ensures that even if the marriage contract 2.0 fails, the core of his financial identity remains intact. Historical trends show that the use of these trusts among middle-market professionals has increased by over 400% since 2015. But the risk-reward calculation isn't just about the money, it's about the legacy risk. Men in 2026 are increasingly concerned with how a second marriage will affect their children from a previous union. In a traditional marriage, the law often prioritizes the current spouse over the children of a previous marriage in the event of death or divorce. To solve this, Jason utilizes the blended family provision, ensuring that his children's education funds and their claim to his estate are legally shielded from any future marital claims. He is navigating a complex web of probate law and family law to ensure that his commitment to a new partner does not come at the expense of his commitment to his bloodline. The psychological shift here is profound. The 2026 man is moving from a fixed mindset of marriage, where the contract is a static, lifelong wait, to a fluid mindset, where the relationship is a series of intentional, documented agreements. This is the new companionship. It is less about the state-sanctioned ceremony and more about the private, contractual understanding between two individuals. For Jason, this approach actually reduces the anxiety that plagued his first marriage. Because the what-ifs are already answered in a signed document, he can focus on the what is, the daily reality of loving and supporting his partner. However, we cannot ignore the price of protection. The marriage contract 2.0 requires a level of emotional maturity and uncomfortable honesty that many are not prepared for. It requires a man to sit across from the person he loves and discuss the end of that love as a mathematical certainty. Case studies show that many relationships don't survive the prenup phase. But for the men who do move forward, the potential outcome is a union built on a foundation of reality rather than fantasy. As we reach the conclusion of this chapter in the century of change, we see that the American man has not given up on love. He has simply stopped believing in magic. He has replaced the fairy tale with a framework. He has learned that in the United States, the most romantic thing you can do for someone is to ensure that if the relationship ends, you both walk away with your dignity and your future protected. But even with the best contracts, the most secure trusts, and the most intentional companionship, there is one final question that haunts every man who has been through this process. It is the question that defines the end of our journey. After all the data has been analyzed, after the laws have been rewritten, and after the digital dust has settled, was it all worth it? In the final part of this masterclass, we will bring everything together. We will look at the ultimate state of the American male in 2026, the path to true reconciliation with the past, and the final verdict on a century of change. The circle is about to close. The conclusion of the deep dive is next. The final verdict on this century of change is not found in a courtroom or a legislative chamber, but in the quiet, calculated life of the man who has integrated every lesson we have covered in this masterclass. As we stand in the year 2026, we are witnessing the emergence of a new sociological archetype, the integrated man. This is a man who has looked at the historical trends of the last 100 years, the rise of no-fault divorce, the weaponization of discovery, the shift in custody presumptions, and the erosion of digital privacy, and has decided that survival is no longer enough. For the American man in 2026, the goal is now the mastery of the system through radical awareness and the reclamation of his own narrative. To see what this looked like in practice, imagine a man named Alexander, a 50-year-old consultant in Denver. Alexander has been through the meat grinder. He lived through the 2010s era of high-conflict litigation. He experienced the psychological vacuum of the 2020s, and he has spent the last few years rebuilding his identity from the ground up. In 2026, Alexander lives in a world that is fundamentally different from the one his father navigated in the 1980s. When Alexander looks at his life, he doesn't see a series of unfortunate events. He sees a series of calibrated data points. He has successfully utilized the marriage contract 2.0 with his current partner. He has protected his legacy through ironclad trusts, and he has curated a digital footprint that reflects his current values rather than his past crises. Alexander represents the culmination of the century of change. He is the potential outcome of a century that began with the total patriarchal control of the 1920s, swung to the total maternal preference of the 1970s, and has finally landed in the complex, algorithmic, and often adversarial landscape of 2026. The final verdict on this experiment is that the old social contract is dead. The idea that the state will protect your interests simply because you are a good provider or a faithful spouse is a historical relic. In 2026, the only person responsible for your protection is you. Step by step, the path to true reconciliation with the past involves a process called historical de-escalation. For Alexander, this meant going back through his own litigation history and stripping away the emotional charge from the documents. He stopped viewing the respondent, or the petitioner, as characters in a drama and started viewing them as entities in a legal process. This psychological pivot is what allowed him to move from the first mountain of his life, the one built on societal expectations, to the second mountain built on personal legacy. Case studies in 2026 suggest that men who achieve this level of cognitive reframing have a significantly higher life expectancy and lower rates of chronic stress-related illnesses than those who remain in a state of perpetual grievance. But what about the macro view? As we look at the United States as a whole in 2026, the century of change has led to a profound contractualization of intimacy. We are seeing a decline in traditional marriage rates and a surge in domestic partnerships and cohabitation agreements. This is the sociological response to a legal system that has become too unpredictable for the average man to navigate without a safety net. The historical trend is clear. As the risks of the state-run marriage contract increased, the American man responded by creating his own private contracts. We are moving toward a future where every significant relationship will be governed by a negotiated agreement rather than a standardized law. This is not the death of romance. It is the birth of intentionality. The data from 2026 also shows a fascinating shift in the role of the father. After decades of being relegated to the secondary parent role, we are seeing the rise of the architect father. This is a man who, like Alexander, utilizes the 50-50 presumption not just to see his children, but to actively build their world. He is the one managing the school apps, the one coordinating the medical appointments, and the one providing the emotional structure that was once considered the exclusive domain of the mother. This shift has forced the legal system to catch up, leading to more equitable potential outcomes in custody cases across the U.S. The century of change has, in a strange way, liberated the American man from the provider-only trap, allowing him to reclaim his place in the domestic sphere on his own terms. However, the final verdict also contains a warning. The 2026 landscape is more efficient, but it is also more cold. The digitization of discovery and the use of AI in legal proceedings have removed much of the human element from the divorce process. A man's life is now a spreadsheet, and his character is a data set. This requires a level of vigilance that previous generations never had to maintain. You are always on the record. Every text, every purchase, every GPS ping is a potential exhibit. The integrated man of 2026 understands that his privacy is his most valuable asset, and he guards it with the same intensity that he guards his finances. As we conclude this deep dive masterclass, we must address the ultimate question. Is the century of change a story of progress or a story of decline? The answer depends entirely on your perspective. If you measure progress by the breakdown of rigid, often oppressive traditional structures, then the last 100 years have been a success. If you measure it by the stability of the family unit and the predictability of a man's future, the results are more troubling. What is undeniable is that the American man has evolved. He is more resilient, more informed, and more strategically minded than his ancestors. He has survived the no-fault revolution, the tender years bias, the discovery traps, and the digital shadow. Alexander, sitting in his office in 2026, doesn't look at the past with bitterness. He looks at it as the forge that created the man he is today. He has reconciled with the fact that the system is not his friend, but it is also not an insurmountable enemy. It is simply a machine that follows a set of rules. Once you understand the rules, you can navigate the machine. This is the ultimate wisdom of the post-divorce man. The power is not in the decree, the power is in the preparation. The century of change has brought us to a point where the American man is a sovereign individual in his own life. He chooses his commitments, he documents his agreements, and he protects his health and his reputation with clinical precision. He has moved from a world of vows to a world of terms. And in doing so, he has found a new kind of freedom. It is a freedom born of transparency, responsibility, and the realization that his value is not determined by a court order. As you close this masterclass, remember that the story of the American man and divorce is still being written. The 2026 reality is just the current chapter. The legislative battles for 50-50 custody continue. The fight for privacy in a digital world is intensifying. And the definition of a fair financial split is constantly being debated. But for you, the viewer, the takeaway is simple. You are the architect of your own aftermath. The century of change has provided you with the data. Now you must provide the direction. The battle for your future was never about winning or losing in court. It was about who you became during the process. Did you become the bitter relic of a failed system? Or did you become the integrated man of the future? The mirror in 2026 is clear. The choice is yours. We have analyzed the history, the law, and the psychology. Now it is time to go out and build the legacy that no courtroom can take away. This deep dive into the century of change has uncovered the hidden mechanics of a system that defines the lives of millions. But while we have focused on the divorce, there is another, even more powerful force that is currently reshaping the American male's existence. It is a shift that happens long before the courtroom, and it is the subject of our next series. What happens when the very foundations of the American workforce and the concept of the career are disrupted by the same forces that change the family? We've looked at the end of the marriage. In our next deep dive, we look at the end of the traditional career and the rise of the digital nomad father. The rules are changing again. Are you ready?